He reaches out his hand of grace to lift us up from whatever may be paralyzing our lives, so that we can walk and jump and dance in newness of life before him.
Whoa, hey, the magic touch. Thank you, sir. When I was in grade school, we would always do this thing where there was an initiative to care about our environment, and the way that they did that was they said, "Okay, kids. Here's the task, here's the time frame. It's going to be a month long, and within that month, you have just that time to bring in as many cans, just random cans, like soda cans or yes, beer cans to used cans, and put them in a trash bag and whatnot, and we'd take that to school. They'd weigh it or count it, whatever it was, and the people who would bring in the most bags of trash of these cans, they would get a prize, and then the class that got then the class would get a prize. And then the grade would get a prize. So you could get an individual prize, a class prize, and then a grade level prize. And it was, I've never been so enthusiastic about cleaning up trash. Like I would walk to the bus stop, and as I'm walking to the bus stop, and I see just like a crushed up thing of Budweiser on the ground, and I looked at it and I was like, yes! And I ran and I picked up the can and I put it in my bag. I see a Sprite can over there. I run over, I picked it up, and I'm going around just picking up trash because I know that this trash is going to be converted into something that is a lot more precious that I really, really want. And so where some people see trash and litter, I see a really cool calculator that I really wanted at school. Okay, it wasn't a calculator, but it was a calculator case because it was a SpongeBob calculator case, and I was really excited about it. And I really, really, really appreciated the sheer fact of something that I thought was insignificant being significant in somebody else's hands. I don't know if it's a phenomenon or whatnot, but people would go around doing dumpster diving. Have you ever heard of dumpster diving? So dumpster diving, for those of you who aren't familiar, is when you just decide to go out and raid the trash. And you're raiding the trash for treasure, because what some people might throw away could be very valuable. And people have found like gaming consoles that they went and resold. People have found like historic artwork that people didn't realize was historic artwork, and they've sold it for thousands. And people have even found suitcases full of banknotes, like deposit, like CDs, and they would the people thought that it was just fake. It wasn't really in effect. And then when the person actually took it to the bank, they said, "Oh yeah, no, this is still active. The account is still going for years and years and years. And since you turned it in, I mean, it's yours." And so people would go out searching trash for treasure. I bring that up because there's sometimes in our life when we're looking at trash and all we can see is the trash. Maybe we're looking at somebody else and all we can see is trash. Maybe we're looking at ourselves and all we can see is trash. But in somebody else's hands, that trash is immeasurable treasure. I love stories, nonfiction and fiction alike, because the nonfiction stories I can empathize with. I can see like what somebody's going through, what they're living with, and I could sometimes relate to them or sympathize, like get a perspective on an event that I hadn't thought of before. And I also like the fictional stories because the fictional stories, they have a way of exaggerating what is real deep down inside. For example, there was a nonfiction situation that David was going through in which everything around him was going pretty bad. I mean, it was trashy to say the least. I mean, his marriage was on the rocks. His eyes were looking places they shouldn't be looking, and he was doing things in his authority that he ought not to have been doing when considering the people that were following him, considering the mission that he had with leading those people, and even to the point of bringing people to their death so that he can get a bye. And yes, Nathan could have come up to him and just told him straight up this nonfiction story of his reality, but instead, he decided to tell him a fictional story so that it could hit home to the deeper reality. And David was able to see through the reality of his own situation just by the display of the fictional story. And Jesus used it too in his parables. All of his parables were made up, coming from his mind to draw the point home to whatever he was going to be presenting. There is a modern fictional story, and it has to revolve around toys. They actually call this story Toy Story. And there have been 4 installments of this story that continues progressing from the perspective of toys. And of course, you have to use your imagination if you've been detached from the childlike person that you used to be. You have to use your imagination to get into the mind of a toy and figure out what is it that a toy lives for? What does a toy want to do? What does a toy aspire towards? And there is a story that is it's a sub-story about one toy in particular. This toy's name is called Forkey. Forkey is the name of this toy. Let me tell you about the origins of Forkey. So Forkey came about because Forkey's creator, her name was Bonnie. Bonnie was in kindergarten. She was just going to kindergarten, and she knew that kindergarten was going to be very different from what she was used to, but she was excited to what was going to be there. And when she was confronted with all the other kids in kindergarten, she realized that there was nobody that really understood her. There was nobody that really wanted to interact with her. There was nobody that really viewed her as she viewed herself, which was special. And so that's why Bonnie had always been playing with these toys. Because in her mind, in her world, these toys that she had, a lot of them she acquired from Andy, which was the previous toy owners before. A lot of them were very special, and she made the toys feel special. But she had got to kindergarten, and she did not have any of her toys with her. And so she was distraught. And then from the trash came a fork and a pipe cleaner and some googly eyes and some silly putty and some weird cardboard looking things, and she created her own toy that she was going to play with. And she called this toy Forkey. And Forkey was good. But the problem was, all Forkey could see was that he was made of trash. So every time that there was a trash can that came around, Forkey said, "Trash!" And he'd go and he'd try to throw himself into the trash can, because in his mind, that is where Forkey belonged. He belonged in the trash. But the other toys around him, the other toys were saying, "No, Forkey, you were created by Bonnie. You belong to Bonnie. You are hers." And Forkey would say, "Trash? I'm trash." And Pixar did a really interesting way of making it cute and making it fun. But there's a point that drives down home, in that the way we see ourselves is the way we are going to treat ourselves. The way that we see others is the way that we will treat others. And if we see them or see ourselves as trash, then it makes obvious sense why we would throw ourselves into trashy situations. It makes sense why we would expect other people to end up in trashy situations, because that's how we view them. The other toys were were doing everything that they could to let Forkey know they were holding him. The family was going on a vacation, and they were holding him, letting him know that, no, you belong with the toys, and all the toys belong with Bonnie, because Bonnie loves us so much. But Forkey couldn't grasp this concept of what love was, because all he could see was the fact that the sum of his parts was just some little bits of things that somebody cobbled together to make something that they thought looked good. But in reality, does it really go together? And Forkey found himself in situations where he would be off by himself, wandering the road alone in the rain, looking for a place where he can dump himself. The esteem that he had about himself was not good. It wasn't esteem. Self-esteem is defined as a confidence and significance of oneself. And he was confidence and satisfaction of oneself. And he was confident that he was trash, and he was not satisfied that he belonged to someone who created him. And it took the other toys around him, one toy in particular, who jumped from the van, because Forkey had already flung himself out of the window, jumped from the van to walk on that road with Forkey, because he knew that he did not want this made toy to be alone. Because what this toy thought of himself was not what his creator intended for him. And the other toy could not stay in the van going to vacation land with the thought of this other toy wandering the desolate road by himself. He then forsake vacation land to go look after this toy who thought terribly of himself, so that he could get this toy and bring this toy with him in the direction to vacation land. During song service, a song that I had sung over and over and over again hit me in a very different way. In my Father's house, there is a place for me. No matter what I think, no matter what anybody might say, there is a place for me. Why is there a place for me? Because regardless of what I think, or regardless what anybody else might tell me, or indirectly tell me by the way that they treat me, I am a child of God. I am a child of God, and I am who He says I am. Who He says I am, that's who I am. Growing up, I didn't realize how much the effects of my life situation in childhood with my parents' divorce and the separation and having to move so frequently, and then living a life that some would deem as impoverished and just not knowing where my food was going to be coming from the next day, and even into college years, where I remember one time I didn't have enough gas to get back to my home, and where I was, it was I could either decide to go home or have enough gas to go to school the next day. And I was toying with that. I knew if I missed school, then it was going to be difficult. I would have to be playing catch up, and so I'm stuck in the parking lot. I'm stuck in the parking lot of this of Home Depot, and because it was wide and spacious, and there weren't eyes looking at me, so I didn't have to worry about it. And I was stuck in here thinking to myself, what do I do? What actually do I do? If I go home, I won't have enough gas to get to school. If I go to school, then maybe enough time would have passed that I could look inside of my bank account and find that there's some extra money. But all while this is happening, my tummy's starting to rumble. My tummy's getting a little hungry, and I'm thinking to myself, I am actually very hungry. I can't remember the last time that I ate, and now I am here thinking about, should I go home? Or should I advance my academic progress. And I'm thinking about all these things and feeling very, very alone. Very alone. And to the point of tears, I saw a bird, just fluttering around in a tree next to me, because I made sure to find a spot where the sun wasn't beating so hard, because it was already hot and I didn't need any more heat. So I found a shade, and I found a bird just fluttering around, and this bird was literally picking worms out of the ground, bringing them up to the tree. And I watched it there, and I said, this bird is eating. I've never felt so envious of a bird in my life. This bird is eating food in front of me, just having a buffet. And I'm thinking to myself, what? And I can't get anything to eat? And all of a sudden, a verse popped into my mind. Are you not worth more than these sparrows? And there in my hunger, I claimed the promise of Jesus. I said, Jesus, if I am who you say I am, then I ought to be having a buffet as well. And so, Jesus, this hunger that I'm feeling, I pray that you fill me, Lord. You fill me. And in this, I reclined my seat because I'm thinking of the meal that I'm about to have. And as I'm reclining my seat, my hand reaches down to a piece of paper down below. And I picked up this paper, and I read it. And say what you might, but this paper was like manna from heaven for me. It said, free meals at Burger King. I said, you said what? Free meals at Burger King? I looked around. I'm in Home Depot parking lot, and I'm like, where's Burger King? Because gas, like we're having that issue with gas. I kid you not. I look around, like just over there, Burger King is in walking distance. That piece of coupon that somebody might have thrown away because it was just trash to them. To me, that was treasure beyond belief. That was a sign of life. That was a sign and a justification that God views me as valuable. Oh, I walked over to that Burger King looking for my Happy Meal. I know, wrong place. But I was happy because I was going to be getting a meal. And I walked back to the car, and I sat down eating my meal alongside that bird who was eating its meal. And I was like, okay, all right, I see what you did there. You're just helping me remember who my Creator said that I am. And sometimes it takes going through difficult situations to be reminded that there is someone who wants the very best for you. That there is someone who doesn't view you as a piece of trash cobbled together to make somebody laugh, but rather they view you as a companion, as somebody who can understand them, who can share in the love with them. And I'm very glad that God created me in His image so that I can experience what true love is. and the sacrifice that it takes. It wasn't until Forkey got to a place where he was met with some toys that had that were a little bit more nefarious because they were wanting love and acceptance, and they couldn't get it, so they were hurting other toys to make themselves feel good, to give themselves a point of something to stand on, to say, yeah, I'm not just in this thrift shop in the back corner, just with dust on me, ready to throw away into the garbage. I am somebody special. I am something special. And the toy Woody that was walking with Forkey found himself also in this spot, and he was looking at the situation that all these toys, Forkey included, were going through, and he was saying to himself, there is somebody that wants you, that doesn't care about your flaws, that doesn't care about what doesn't define you by what you're doing, rather just wants to be with you and accept you and love you. All the toys that I know of have chips and bruises and dents and whatever, but they have a marking on their foot that identifies them as being the property of the one who gave everything for them. And it's that identity, that marker, that tells the toys who they are, who they belong to, what they mean to their owner. And with everything in him, he was trying to convey this message that you can be loved because you are loved. It's just a matter of accepting it. And Forkey was left with one of the toys, and all he could remember to tell that toy was an experience of how the other toys who were owners, or who were part of the batch from the owner, from Bonnie, how they treated him. And he was just talking about it like it was nothing. Yeah, I was going over here, and then they just came and they got me, and then I don't know, everything just happened all of a sudden. And as he was talking about these things, the other toy was listening, the nefarious one, and was saying, yeah, but you have a family. What you're telling me is that you belong somewhere. And it was from this toy's perspective that Forkey could now look at himself in a different way and said, well, I guess I never thought of it that way. I guess they do love me. That's my Mickey Mouse voice. I need to stop. And through his testimony, through his witnessing, and the witnessing of others, he was able to indirectly witness to this other toy. Look at me using the word witness, talking about toys. It's a fictional story used to drive home a point. And the point is that as beings created in God's image, we have a responsibility to look after one another. Because we don't know what somebody might be going through. We don't know the life that they might be leading. We don't know the way that they're thinking about themselves. We don't know the way that others are thinking about them. And maybe they just need somebody who will walk that desolate, lonely road in the rain with them. With nothing more than the intention of getting them to realize their worth. Not their worth in my way of thinking, in anybody else's way of thinking, but in the Creator's way of thinking. And Forkey realized that he was created for a purpose. And his purpose was to bring joy. His purpose was to bring joy and life to others around him. And through his cobbled, disformed, disfigured, really weird-looking way, he would bring a smile on some people's faces. And it's a fictional story that translates into a real thing. Because when you see kids looking at Forkey, they don't say, They're like, they're smiling. Because Forkey has a way about him that brings a smile on your face. I didn't realize how those situations would that I was going through would impact the way that I would continue to live my life. And there's a lot of times where my depressive and anxious moments would reach its peak. And I would think to myself thoughts that nobody should think of about themselves. They were destructive thoughts. And it got to a point where I was disgusted with myself because of how I thought about myself, and the cycle continued. And even to the point where I would criticize what I was doing. I would criticize what I was doing and judge myself based on the fact of the things that I was doing. And again, I was reminded in moments of deep despair that I wasn't alone in feeling this way. If you turn with me to Romans 7, verse 19. And when you have time, go through this particular verse or this particular chapter, and listen to the words of Paul. Paul says here, "For I do not do the good I want to do." He gets very philosophical, bear with me. "For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil that I do not want to do, this thing I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but the sin living in me that does it." If you recognize within yourself a desire for good, then you have to recognize what Paul is saying. You have to recognize that that desire for good is counteracted by an innate, uncontrollable tendency towards sin. And Paul recognizes this, and he says, "So what then? What now? What a wretched person I am. Who can save me? Who can rescue me from this body that is subject to death, walking down a desolate, lonely road?" And he says in verse 25, "Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord." He delivers me. He delivers me. And in these moments of of depression, I would end up going to a counselor. And I remember one of the counselors that I went to, I was just being stubborn. Oh, I was stubborn. I was like, I'm not saying anything. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to. And she recognized very quickly that I was beating myself up for a lot of things that I ought not to have been beating myself up about. And she recognized very quickly that that words mattered to me in particular. And being the musical person that I am, she said, "Do you like singing songs?" And I was like, "Yes, I like singing songs. She's going to tell me a song that I need to sing to make me feel better." And she said, "I want you to repeat this song after me." I am special, I am special, yes I am, yes I am. I am very special, I am very special, yes I am, yes I am. This song had 4 verses. I am special, I am valuable, I am important, I am lovable. And I would add a 3rd verse, a 5th verse I can count. I am treasured, I am treasured, yes I am, yes I am. I am very treasured, I am very treasured, yes I am, yes I am. You might find difficulty in singing that song even when you're alone, by yourself, with no one else around. Because there might be something inside of you that's saying, "No, I'm not. No, I can't even sing that song and be honest. No, I'm not." It took everything within me to forget about the thoughts that I had about myself and remember the song and sing that song to myself. And I know I'm not alone in singing a song about my value, because I read it. I read it somewhere. I read it in Psalms. In Psalms 139, I read it. Somebody wrote a song about who they were and about their Creator. And we read it, but sometimes we forget that it's a song. For you created me, this is 139 in verse 13, Psalms 139 verse 13. For you created me in created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And I praise you because I am fearfully. And this fearfully, let me explain something. This fearfully isn't with fear and trembling. No, fearfully can also be used to imply something that is intentional, that is as an emphasis, something intentional as an emphasis of significant importance, and it could emphasize either something good or bad, and the artist of this song doesn't want you to confuse it with something being bad. He says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and that includes me. And I know that full well. David sang a song to remember who God thought of him, how God thought of him. Because the way he was thinking about himself was leading to destruction. And the more we think about ourselves and what we can do or what other people think about us, the more it leads to destruction. The only way that it leads to something positive is when we view ourselves with the eyes of our Creator. And God has created each and every one of us. He has created each and every one of us with a purpose, a meaningful purpose, not for destruction, but for everlasting life through Jesus Christ. And when you look at your spoon person, cobbled together, whether you have them in your hand or whether you're imagining them in your mind, I want you to remember, as I'm ending here, I want you to remember that your thoughts towards yourself are influenced by sin. And there is an enemy who is constantly wanting you to continue living a life focused on sin. But there is a Creator, a wonderful Creator, who has other thoughts about you. And the thoughts that he has in verse 17, he says, "How precious are your thoughts? How amazing are your thoughts concerning me? How vast the sum of them. They're never ceasing. They never end." And God longs for you to be in vacation land with him for eternity, as opposed to walking a desolate road alone. And as we recognize that about ourselves, then we have to recognize that about everybody else we meet. Because God has the same thoughts towards them. Yes, even the person that was hurting you. Because God recognizes that it is the sin within them that is causing them to do that. But he is the rescuer of our sin. God is the rescuer of our sin. Father God, as you continue to rescue us from our sin, and as we continue to find our path in a life towards you, I pray that we bring someone else along, that we help them see the value that they have, the treasure that they are, not the trash that they were told they were, but the treasure because they were created by you. And they are loved by you. We are loved by you. And as we leave this place today, I pray that you fill our thoughts, fill our minds with your thoughts of love towards us, with compassion, with care, and draw us closer unto you seeking nothing more than being with you in your kingdom for all eternity. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.